My mate rejects me. The pack hates me. Then the shadow beast arrives to claim me. This book gives you hope. It teaches you to brave and share great stories with friends. Watch my summary now and read it.
The air in California is heavy. It is that midday, baked earth heavy, where the dust settles on the leaves of the Santa Cruz Mountains and everything feels agonizingly mundane. Picture it. You know, that specific kind of heat.
Yeah, that oppressive, stagnant summer heat.
Exactly. The Torma pack house stands under this oppressive, ordinary sun. Everything is routine, everything is normal, and then the fabric of reality simply tears.
It doesn't open like a door.
No, it rips. It is a violent, jagged wound in the mundane world, weeping a substance that can only be described as midnight glitter. It's a terrifying juxtaposition. The dry, golden California heat is instantly swallowed by an encroaching, freezing void.
The sensory collision is absolute. You go from a standard terrestrial Tuesday to confronting a cosmic rupture.
It is a complete olfactory invasion. You're standing there smelling the dry pine, the baked asphalt, the sweat of the pack, and suddenly your lungs are filled with the sharp, violent tang of ozone.
Like a lightning strike that hasn't happened yet.
Yes, mixed with the heavy, suffocating scent of ancient smoke. Smoke from fires that burned centuries ago lingering in the back of your throat. And from that midnight glitter, the shadow beast emerges.
The physical manifestation of a deity stepping onto mortal soil.
You look up and the first thing you see are the eyes. They're not merely glowing, they are beaming red and gold. It is a furious, infernal fire that cuts through the California daylight as if the sun itself is a weak, dying bulb.
And right beneath those eyes stands Alpha Victor Wolf.
The dictator. A man who rules 10,000 shifters with absolute terrifying authority. He holds the power of life and death over an entire society. And yet, in the shadow of those red and gold eyes, Victor's primal terror is palpable. He is reduced to prey.
And then comes the sound.
The sound is visceral. It's not the sound of a battle. It is the wet, heavy thud of shifter bodies hitting the dirt. One by one, then in waves.
The sheer, crushing gravity of the deity's presence is so absolute that their superhuman senses simply fail.
Their nervous systems short-circuit under the weight of it. They drop to the ground, entirely paralyzed by the aura of a god. The silence that follows that mass collapse is louder than a scream. Pause. 3x5s. Welcome to our deep dive. You are here because you want to understand the anatomy of trauma and power. You want to know how a soul is broken and what kind of terrifying fire it takes to forge it back together.
Today, we're taking your custom stack of notes on Rejected by Jaymin Eve, the foundational text in the Shadow Beast Shifters series.
And we are pulling out the darkest, most vital insights. Our mission is to trace the grueling journey of Mera. We are going from her existence as a broken, outcast punching bag to her evolution into a shadow walker.
We're going to tear apart the subversion of shifter hierarchies, navigate the sprawling interdimensional mechanics of the solar system, and scrutinize the devastating psychological cost of choosing your own destiny over a preordained mate.
This is not a triumphant, sparkling fairy tale. It is a study in survival.
The foundation of this reality requires serious scrutiny. We have to look at the subversion of the shifter hierarchy. If you're familiar with traditional paranormal romance frameworks, the alpha mate bond is the ultimate salvation.
Right. It's the biological and spiritual pinnacle of a shifter's existence.
It's the thing that makes everything right in their world. But Eve weaponizes that very trope. The bond here is not salvation, it is a horror story.
It is a gilded cage lined with razor blades. And the trauma is inextricably linked to Torma Wolf. He is the future alpha. He's her preordained mate. And for 10 years, he does absolutely nothing while his best friend, Jackson, and the rest of the pack systematically torture her.
If we look closely at the mechanics of the world building here, Torrin's passivity is a glaring issue. Torrin doesn't physically maim her in those early years. His crime is omission. Wait, from a narrative logic standpoint, the world asks us to believe that a true mate, even an unshifted one, can stand idly by while his other half is brutalized daily. It stretches the internal consistency of the magic system to its breaking point.
I have to disagree there.
If the bond is a biological imperative, a fundamental law of their species, his passivity directly contradicts the foundational rules of shifter instinct.
Think about the psychological horror of that passivity, though. His silence is the violence. Torrin is the future alpha. His refusal to intervene is a tacit endorsement of the abuse.
It's systemic ostracization.
Approved from the very top. He watches her bleed. He watches Jackson tear into her. And that is precisely what makes the public rejection of the winter solstice profoundly, agonizingly devastating.
Because of the shift.
Exactly. When she finally goes through her first shift, when the bond snaps into place, there's a microsecond where biology demands he protect her. And he actively, consciously denies it. He stands over her in front of the entire pack and he severs the bond.
Eve describes the rejection as her soul shattering into crystal shards of agony.
Because it is a physical, sensory reality. It is not a metaphor for a bad breakup. Her soul is fragmenting. The rejection is a physical amputation performed without anesthesia.
It's biological trauma.
She has just survived the absolute agony of her first shift. Bones breaking, muscles tearing and reforming to accommodate the wolf. She is exhausted, vulnerable, entirely exposed in the snow. And in that moment of absolute defenselessness, the one soul tethered to hers rips itself away. Pause, 3 5s.
We really should look at the visual marker of her isolation, her hair. The notes detail this specific aesthetic choice. A deep burgundy at the scalp, lightening in an ombre effect to strawberry blonde at the tips.
The Callahan lineage, translating to the little bright-headed one.
It's a massive genetic anomaly in the Torma pack, but it's also an incredibly convenient narrative trope.
How so?
The protagonist with the utterly unique, impossibly beautiful hair color that sets her apart from the homogeneous masses. It borders on a cliché. It functions merely as a neon sign screaming main character to the reader.
Oh, come on.
It is. It's a superficial aesthetic choice designed to make her feel special despite her abuse. It's a hallmark of young adult fantasy that often undermines the gritty realism the story is trying to establish.
But you cannot reduce her biology to a cliché. It's not a neon sign for the reader. It is a visceral, biological target on her back for the pack.
A target.
Yes. It is a giant flashing stop sign, announcing her presence to her abusers. She cannot hide. She cannot blend in. Every single day, her physical appearance is a reminder of her father's treason against the pack.
The burgundy ombre is a genetic brand.
It represents the utter impossibility of assimilation. When you are the outcast in a vicious society, any physical deviance is a weapon used against you.
If we expand on that and examine the real-world psychology of social isolation, prolonged, systemic ostracization within closed communities invariably mimics cult dynamics.
Absolutely.
Think about how this applies to any high-control group today. The Torma pack is a dictatorship. Alpha Victor literally changed his surname to Wolf to solidify his ideological and biological supremacy.
He branded the entire society with his identity.
Exactly. When a closed society operates under totalitarian control, the outgroup, in this case Mera and her mother, becomes the repository for the community's collective aggression. The society functions smoothly because all their innate violence is directed at a sanctioned target.
And look at the physiological toll that constant, unrelenting fear takes on her body. Mera experiences double vision. A darkness descends across her sight during moments of extreme stress.
She describes it as her fractured sanity.
Her brain is literally distancing itself from the carnage of her life to survive. The constant hypervigilance, the expectation of physical pain around every corner is destroying her neurological pathways. When you live in a state where every footstep in a hallway could mean a broken rib, your brain rewrites its own wiring just to keep you breathing.
The double vision is indeed a fascinating psychological defense mechanism. Dissociation in the face of insurmountable trauma is well documented, but the lore later reveals this double vision is actually her latent ability to see the shadow realm, and that retroactively turns a trauma response into a magical superpower. This is a recurring issue in the pacing and logic of the world building. It softens the very real psychological damage by turning it into a supernatural gift.
It doesn't negate the trauma, though. The magic manifests through the trauma. The shadow vision arrives when her brain is breaking. That is the genius of the pacing. No, the magic doesn't cure the pain. The pain is the doorway to the magic. It is a fundamental rewriting of her biology triggered by extreme stress.
Which leads directly to the rule of first shift. The absolute biological tyranny of this rule is central to the world building. Wolves cannot shift until the winter solstice of their 22nd year.
It's a brutal law of nature.
Let us analyze this strictly from a biological standpoint. The lore justifies this by stating shifters age slowly, living hundreds of years. Therefore, 22 is effectively their biological puberty.
But look at it from a psychological standpoint. Think about the forced vulnerability of that late maturation. For 22 years, Mera is trapped in a fragile human body, surrounded by apex predators who have already shifted.
They've already gained their healing factors.
They've already accessed their lethal strength. She heals at human speed. Every bruise, every cut lingers for weeks. It is a prolonged, decades-long state of physical inferiority designed to break the spirit before the wolf even emerges.
And if we look at it from a sociological standpoint, the rule of first shift is a mechanism of control. It ensures that the youth are entirely dependent on the alpha and the established hierarchy for over 2 decades.
They can't run.
They cannot survive alone in the wild or against rogue threats. The delay in maturation guarantees conformity through sheer dependence. The alpha doesn't just rule them, he owns their safety during their most vulnerable decades. Pause 3 to 5.
She does try to run, though. She chooses to run before her shift, knowing it might kill her because the psychological torture is worse than death.
Right.
And when the shift finally happens, when the rejection destroys her, she accidentally calls upon the mists, freezing the pack. And then the Shadow Beast arrives. He burns Victor Wolf alive with a casual thought, and he drags Mera through a portal.
The narrative jump from the mundane, small-town California pack politics to the interdimensional nexus of the Solaris system is profoundly jarring. We are thrust from a grounded terrestrial struggle for survival into a cosmic framework featuring floating palaces, libraries connecting 11 dimensions, and magical goblins. It is severe narrative whiplash. The tonal inconsistency destabilizes your grounding in the reality of the trauma we just spent hours dissecting. Suddenly, we are in a high fantasy multiverse.
The whiplash is intentional.
I don't buy that.
It is. The shock of that transition perfectly mirrors Mera's internal paradigm shift. Her entire world has just been unmade. She was prepared to die in the snow in California. Instead, she is yanked into the infinite.
It's still jarring for the reader.
The realization of her Shadow Realm heritage is terrifying because she realizes she hasn't escaped. She's simply traded one apex predator, Torin, for a cosmic interdimensional one, the Shadow Beast. The disorientation you feel trying to keep up with the world building is exactly the disorientation she feels as a prisoner in a realm she doesn't understand.
Consider the cultural history of this dark deity worship among the shifters. They worship the Shadow Beast. He is the creator of their kind, a product of a drunken bet in the realm of Brolder. Yet he is fundamentally a demonic entity.
Darkness personified.
Why do human-wolf hybrids worship that which is intrinsically terrifying? Look at historical human fascination with dark gods. Deities of the underworld or destruction are often placated through fear, not love.
Because power demands reverence, and the irony is sickening. The Torma pack, who pride themselves on their supremacy, who brutalize the weak and cast out the vulnerable, are praying for strength to a deity that ultimately annihilates their alpha with a flick of his wrist.
They miscalculated the nature of their own god.
They worship the apex predator, completely failing to realize that to the apex predator, they are nothing but prey. They built a religion around a monster, and then they act surprised when the monster shows up and acts like a monster.
The psychological parallels between the characters across these realms are intricate. Let us look at Mera as the Phoenix. In Chapter 1, we are given her English literature assignment. From the ashes, the phoenix will rise.
It's a powerful motif.
It is a blunt literary device.
We have to analyze that, quote, 3 distinct times to understand its weight throughout the journey. First, as a pure coping mechanism. When Mera is walking the halls of Torma, battered, bleeding from Jackson's claws, she repeats that line like a mantra.
It grounds her.
It is the only psychological raft she has to keep from drowning in despair. It is a desperate human plea for a future that doesn't hurt.
Second, it operates as overt foreshadowing of her biology. The phoenix is a creature of fire. The shadow beast is a creature of dark fire. When he attempts to intimidate her, when he shifts into a 12-foot fire demon wolf, the flames do not consume her.
She is fire adjacent.
The phoenix metaphor becomes a literal biological reality of her latent shadow realm genetics. Her body recognizes the heat of destruction as a native element.
And third, the most tragic realization. She must actually burn down to rise. A phoenix cannot rise unless it first turns to ash.
It requires total destruction.
Mera cannot become who she is meant to be until her ties to Torma are completely, irrevocably incinerated. She has to lose her father to treason, lose Danny to violence, lose her mate to betrayal, and lose her own humanity to survive. The ashes are the charred remains of her soul.
She can't just walk away.
No. She doesn't just get to put on a pair of wings and fly away. She has to burn alive first. Pause 3 5s.
This brings us to the Shadow Beast himself, Darkor. He is not merely an antagonist or a captor. He is a displaced king. The ancient repressed fury he carries is rooted in profound betrayal. His family exiled him, sealing the Shadow Realm behind an adaptive, sentient spell. He is a god without a kingdom.
Look at his shifting forms. He is the 12-foot fire demon wolf, a manifestation of his absolute uncontrollable rage and power, the form that burns alphas alive.
But he is also the dark-haired, gold-eyed man.
He forces himself into a humanoid shape to navigate the other realms, to maintain control over his own fury. His existence is an exercise in ancient, suffocating restraint. He's constantly holding back a tide of dark creation energy just to have a conversation.
His isolation parallels Mera's, but it is echoed even more profoundly in Milalakin, the angel from Honor Meadows. For context, Angel sits alone in the Library of Knowledge. She possesses immense amber wings, an oracle sight, and an immense crushing power. She exists in a state of regal loneliness.
The tragedy of Angel's family defines her. She says, "My past and future will be painted in shades of red." She is an oracle of violence. She has unimaginable power, but she is utterly, completely alone.
It's a heavy burden.
Her isolation parallels Mera's beautifully. Both women are outcasts, not because they are weak, but because their inherent nature makes them incompatible with the societies they were born into. They are too much for the people around them. Pause 3 5s.
We need to look closely at the mechanics and atmosphere of the Solaris system. The sensory world building is where the environment demands obsessive attention. Take Inky, for example.
Inky is not a prop. Inky is a crucial character.
Inky is a sentient blob of dark smoke. The specific descriptions highlight its jiggling motions when it is amused and how it swells to the size of an entire wall when it is angry or protective.
It's fascinating.
If smoke can get angry and swell to the size of a wall, what does that actually tell us about the physics of the Shadow Realm? What does it imply when the very atmosphere, the mist, the smoke, possesses emotional intelligence?
It implies that the Shadow Realm is not just a location. It is a living, breathing organism. Inky is a piece of the realm's raw creation energy.
But jiggling.
The fact that it jiggles, the fact that it actively seeks to protect Mera, suggests that the darkness is not inherently evil. It has desires. It has a capacity for loyalty. When Inky swells to the size of a wall, it is a physical manifestation of atmospheric rage. The air itself is willing to go to war for its master. The environment is not a backdrop. It is a participant.
Which leads into the hub of this multiverse, the Library of Knowledge. A physical space that acts as a nexus for 11 distinct dimensions. From a mechanical standpoint, a library is the perfect spatial metaphor for a multiverse. Books are inherently portals to other realities. This grounds the sprawling interdimensional travel in a concept that is familiar and tactile.
And within Shadow's personal lair attached to this library, we have the Room of Need. It manifests whatever Mera requires: clothes, food, a shower.
But there is a dark undertone here.
Exactly. It is an environment completely controlled by Shadow. Her comfort is entirely dependent on his magic. She's being cared for, but she's also entirely reliant on the whims of the creature that abducted her.
The sensory overload reaches its absolute zenith when they travel to Fairy, the auditorium. The environment here demands we linger on the specific, intoxicating smell of the killer flowers. It is an olfactory trap. Fairy operates on the principle of sensory seduction followed by lethal consumption. Everything is beautiful and everything wants to eat you.
We have to spend time on the fertility music. The lunar moon music that drifts through the air in Fairy. It induces a biological, agonizing, inescapable arousal. It is a terrifying concept.
It's highly problematic.
Her body is entirely hijacked by an external magical auditory stimulus. She loses all autonomy. Her nervous system is being played like an instrument by the atmosphere itself.
I heavily question the narrative ethics of this magic. To introduce an environmental factor that forcibly strips a character of their sexual autonomy and induces physical agony unless satiated is a highly problematic trope. No, listen, it reduces the characters to slaves of the environment, bypassing their emotional agency entirely to force proximity between Mera and Shadow.
But that is exactly the point. It is a dark mirror to the shifter mating bond. You are criticizing the ethics of the music, but the music is merely an externalization of the biological tyranny Mera has been fighting her entire life.
I still think it's a cheap narrative trick.
The mating bond strips autonomy. The music strips autonomy. It forces her to confront the primal loss of control. It forces her to rely on Shadow, not as a captor, but as the only anchor in a world that is trying to consume her from the inside out. It is a physical manifestation of the exact vulnerability she felt when Torn rejected her.
If we look at the physics of Fairy, specifically the floating architecture, lens, floating silver palace, hovering over fields of flowing red lava, How does stationary magic versus moving magic dictate the physics of fantasy worlds? In Fairy, the land itself is in constant flux. The magic is kinetic. The architecture must float because to be tethered to the ground is to be unmade by the shifting terrain.
And if we reanalyze the Solar System's connective tissues based on these spatial rules, the Library of Knowledge has to be a stationary anchor point. It is the static hub around which the kinetic chaos of the 11 realms rotates. Without the library, the realms would bleed into one another and tear each other apart. Pause 3-5.
This loss of autonomy in Fairy actually perfectly mirrors what happens when Torrin finally shows back up to reclaim the bond. Choice versus destiny. We need to spend a significant amount of time tearing apart this moment.
This is the climax of her psychological journey. Torrin orchestrates a kidnapping. He uses Simone, Mera's best friend, her only tether to love and humanity back in California, as bait to lure her back. And then, standing in the Torma lands, he offers her the role of alpha mate. He offers to fulfill the destiny he shattered.
Torrin's sudden redemption arc severely lacks logical consistency. Why does he suddenly want her? He rejected her violently, publicly. The narrative pivots him from a passive abuser to an obsessed, groveling lover without sufficient psychological groundwork. It is an unearned character reversal purely designed to create a love triangle dynamic and force tension.
You are fundamentally misunderstanding Torrin's psychology. It is not a redemption arc. There is zero redemption occurring. It is toxic entitlement.
But he claims the bond.
He doesn't love her. He felt the immense, terrifying power she wielded when she froze the pack and opened the Shadow Realm. He has spent the last year realizing that shifters are literally batteries for the Shadow Beast, and he wants her power. He wants to chain her shadow magic to his alpha status to elevate himself.
So it's a power grab.
It is a calculated predatory grab for supremacy masked as romantic destiny. He wants to own the weapon that almost destroyed his pack.
Which leads to the physicality of her defiance. When he physically overpowers her, attempting to force his energy into her to reignite the broken bond, she bites him.
She doesn't just bite him. She tears into his lip. She tastes his blood. We really need to pause and recognize the absolute savagery of this act. Pause 3-5. This is the ultimate violent rejection of the paranormal romance trope. She is not the submissive mate accepting the alpha's bite to seal their bond. She is the one drawing blood. She uses physical violence to break his physical dominance. She spits his blood back at him. She chooses the terrifying, lethal unknown of the Shadow Beast over the gilded, suffocating cage of her preordained mate. It is the moment she finally weaponizes her own trauma.
Which brings us to the betrayal in the mists, the Morrow powder betrayal. Jackson and Torrin ambush her with a mildewy powder that entirely incapacitates her shadow magic.
It is a profound emotional betrayal. Jackson, her oldest friend, the boy she is just beginning to understand and perhaps forgive for his years of torment, actively participates in drugging and kidnapping her. And they do it by delivering the most devastating news possible. Danny, the Wanderer, the only mother figure Mera had left in the world, is dead, bled out in a Torma cell.
Think about how grief operates in the narrative here. It is described as a hurricane. It is not a passive sadness. It is a kinetic, destructive force that shreds the soul into unrecognizable pieces. It is a physical pressure inside her chest that demands release.
And that hurricane of grief is the catalyst for the climax. Pushed to the absolute brink of her sanity, standing in the underground theater of the school where she was tormented for a decade, Mera stops running. She stops hiding. She reaches out to the void, and she opens the pathway.
She pulls the raw creation energy mists from the shadow realm directly into the earth plane.
She calls the darkness to protect herself. She calls it to punish Torma. The mists, the hulked-out, hyperlethal version of Inky, flood the room. They respond to her grief by bringing absolute destruction.
This action requires rigorous debate. Is this moment true self-actualization? Is the phoenix finally rising from the ashes of her trauma? Or is it the start of an apocalypse? The lore explicitly states that these myths are the building blocks of reality. They are pure creation energy. By dragging them across dimensions through sheer, unrestrained grief, did she just unmake the world? Is she a survivor, finally taking control, or has she become a destroyer who will end everything?
She can be both. That is the brilliance of her evolution. Survival in a world of apex predators requires the capacity for absolute destruction. She realizes that to protect herself, to ensure she is never a victim again, she must become more terrifying than the monsters who hunt her. She isn't just surviving, she is rewriting the rules of the food chain.
But the implications of unleashing a sentient, world-building energy out of personal vengeance cannot be ignored. The mists resist going back. They bleed into the earth realm, and they want to stay with her.
Because they recognize their master. They recognize the sheer force of her will. Pause 335s. We have journeyed through a grueling emotional and physical landscape today. From the blood-stained locker rooms of Torma, where a young woman was systematically broken by the very people meant to protect her, to the floating, gravity-defying silver palaces of Fairy. We have dissected the anatomy of a soul shattered by rejection and watched it reforge itself in the fires of isolation.
It's been an intense exploration.
The core takeaway from this sprawling, dark journey is undeniable. True power is not granted by destiny. It is not ordained by an alpha. It is forged in the fires of utter isolation. It is claimed in the darkness when you have absolutely nothing left to lose.
The transformation from victim to a being capable of commanding the fabric of reality is complete. But the consequences of that transformation remain dangerously unresolved. She has the power of a god, but she is still fundamentally a traumatized young woman.
Which leaves you with one final, lingering question. You have heard the evidence. You know the mechanics of the Solar system. You know what it takes to break a soul and build a Shadow Walker. If the mists of the Shadow Realm are pure creation energy, a living, thinking, breathing power, and Mera can command them simply by asking, what happens if the mists decide they don't want to go back? Or if the darkness she called to save her decides that she is its new realm? Pause 325s.